we're going to launch Sora, our video product. We don't want the world to just be text. If the AI systems are, primarily you interact with by text, I think we're missing something important. We want our AIs to be able to understand video and generate video, and I think it really will deeply change the way that we use computers.
This is critical to our AGI roadmap.
There's some competitors out there now that are as good, and a lot of it depends on your use case too, because what a lot of these companies are doing is they're adding features that are fairly unique. Like, it's one thing to have the state-of-the-art text to video image, which is really all we've seen from Sora at this point, where it's like a prompt and then it gives you a video and it looks great. Well, there's a lot of folks doing that look great, but then a lot of them most of them have added the ability to take an image, which kind of changes the game if you prompt it with an image, because now you can use things like Flux or something else and create, I did this with myself, create yourself as a superhero, make yourself look like Thor or Spider-Man or the Hulk or something, and then animate that, right? And so that gives you some more freedom.
And welcome back to another episode of the 100-Year Podcast. My name is Adario Strange, and this week we have back with us a returning champion, Blaine Brown. We had him on, I would say, earlier this year. I want to say it was like 8 or 9 months ago.
Yeah,
like that.
I think it was February, so maybe 9 months or so. Yeah.
In AI development news time, that's or dog years. That's basically 1.5 to 2 years.
Easy, maybe 10 years.
Yeah. The entire world has changed. A lot of things have developed. You've become the master of viral AI clips, by the way. I mean, a lot of people are still experimenting, but you're very clever in the way you put, the topics you choose, the subject matter. And what you did was you took Joe Rogan recently did an interview with Josh Brolin. And for those who don't know, who aren't super Marvel nerds, he is the voice of Thanos in the Avengers series. And so what you did was you took Thanos and put him in Joe Rogan's studio, but kept Joe Rogan as Joe Rogan.
I didn't want to be filmed, so I stopped early.
You got off.
I did
off
get
the
filmed
right time.
the last time.
Yeah.
I drank. Yeah, it was super lame. I was at a what do you call it? A Del Taco, and I tapped the cab in front of me accidentally when I was moving forward, and he got out and created a thing, and somebody filmed it from the back of the cab.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
so it was basically it. Josh Brolin doesn't sound any different from Thanos. It's like he put no extra sauce on it. So it really does look and sound like Joe Rogan is sitting there interviewing Thanos. I mean, did you find that on your own? Did someone tell you about it? Or
Well, no, I just, I've been a big Marvel fan. And so I knew when he had Josh Brolin on there that, he did the voice of Thanos. And I was actually originally listening to that podcast in my car, so I wasn't watching it. And every time Brolin would speak, it would make me think of Thanos, because he has, it's that same voice. I think maybe he goes a register lower or something. It sounds more menacing slightly in the movies, but for all intents and purposes, it was the same. And I got to thinking, I bet I could use some of these new tools that let you do facial expression mapping and lip sync and those sorts of things to kind of animate a fairly realistic, AI version of Thanos. With very little effort, to be honest, because I didn't have to clone the voice or anything like that you'd normally have to do for something like that. And so it was just a fun experiment, just to have it, to take about a minute worth of a podcast and have it switch back and forth like it's a real conversation between two cameras, but then have convert Josh Brolin to Thanos. And it, I think it went close to 1 million views and got a shout out from the Joe Rogan Experience podcast channel or account on X, and so that was pretty fun when that started lighting up my notifications.
This is another reason why you're not just a master of viral AI video clips, but you're agnostic. You experiment with all of the tools, and we're going to get to that later. But that's kind of my favorite thing about you, particularly I'm everywhere. I'm on X, I'm on Threads, I'm on Blue Sky. Right now, I would say X for me is primarily, I only go there for maybe AI news, AI experiment stuff. A lot of the news stuff has gone to Threads and I guess increasingly Blue Sky, but I still stick around on X for the AI stuff. And beyond anyone else, I see a lot of people kind of try to master one particular tool, which is great. But the thing is, and as you well know, there are tools and updates to existing tools coming out every 2 to 3 weeks. So at this point, if you attempt to do a thing, kind of like the old school where you say, well, I'm going to learn Photoshop and I'm going to become a master of Photoshop. No, you have to figure out everything that's coming out, and the dust will eventually settle. I'm assuming in the next couple of
You would
years.
think, yeah.
So, but what I love about what you do on the web is that you're showing everyone what's possible with everything, and you're not kind of like just sticking to one area. So I think it's a great approach, and it puts you kind of at an advantage for when the dust does settle. You know,
Yeah,
um,
and it's kind of interesting because as when you start building your influence and you start having decent number of followers. I think I've got over 13,000 on X, and then I blew up on Instagram just in the last 3 months. Since like August, I went from like 100 followers to over 17,000 because I had several things go very viral. But you start getting access, and this was already kind of happening when we talked last time. But you start getting access to like these creative partner programs from a lot of the folks that are pushing these things. So you get like free credits and access, and there's this initial inclination when you get free access from a certain company to only show favorable things from them, right? So I try to keep it as real as I can, right? I'm not you know just going to post things from one company that gives me access, and if I'm paying for access on another one, I'm not I try not to show favoritism, because I just want to use the tools and figure out what the limits are and what you can use them for and what they're kind of bad at as well. And um, I try to keep it authentic, and I think that's more or less why folks are following me.
I that's why I follow you. I want to kind of, before we get into a discussion of the many tools out there, and for those listening and watching, this is kind of like again our state of AI video for the year. Now that we're kind of closing out 2024, but before we get into that, I want to talk about a couple of things in the mainstream news. There are artists out there using cutting edge technology in really cool, beautiful, exciting ways. I don't necessarily think that is the case for the music video from Kanye West Bomb. Basically, he put it out and he didn't really kind of like directly announce that there was a generative AI component to it. Maybe he was hoping to fool people. I don't know. It was fairly obvious to me, you know, almost immediately upon watching it. The faces were kind of plastic. Um, it looked like they tried to generate Cybertrucks, but I'm someone I've generated a ton of Cybertrucks using generative AI, and I know how hard it can be if you're using certain models. I I I don't know what they used, but I'm guessing it was open source because it was so rough, and some of the results, like of the tools that I use, it made me think that they were using open source specifically to avoid any copyright issues or any kind of issues along those lines. So did you see it? What'd you think?
Yeah, I was torn on it. I thought that it was more or less kind of terrible, but also kind of weird and fun at the same time. I don't know, like I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think it's maybe that was the vibe he was going for, but it didn't really hit with me, and I just I think you know if I want to, there's some really great ways to replicate, specific items and people and character consistency and even object consistency, like a Cybertruck, right? I mean, things like Flux, for instance, which is an open source model for image creation. You can fairly easily, with some tools you can install on your computer, you can train a model with 10 to 15 photos of a truck or of anything you can imagine, and bring that in as a LoRa, kind of like you would do with Stable Diffusion, which you still can do, but it's just the quality's leaps and bounds better with Flux, and generate kind of your still shots. If I was approaching it, that's what I would have done with that, so that the thing you're trying to recreate is perfect, because the chance of like that, a Cybertruck being trained into like one of the mainstream video models, maybe not, but you can get around that by just using image to video and then training your image that you're using in your video, training the image creation tool to be able to produce a perfect, Cybertruck or whatever the object is that you want to represent with AI.
All right, so let's get into AI video. Here's how I want to lay this out. I am assuming, because you are voracious, sir. You consume all these tools. So I'm assuming in the list that I'm going to lay out that there's something I'm missing. So if there's something I'm missing at the end, name something,
Sure.
bring it up if you think it's worth naming. But what I want to do is I want to go over some of the top AI video tools, whether they're new or existing and maybe have just been updated, and just get your kind of hot take on each of these tools. All right.
Sure.
So let's start with what just got released to the public from Google. And again, I want to say this doesn't necessarily mean that you've used all of these tools, but I think you are qualified at this point as someone who has extensively used most of the tools to opine, even on tools that are in beta or you haven't necessarily like fully put through their
Mhm.
paces. So let's talk about Google VO, which just came out
Yep.
in early December.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Google's one of those companies that you can never count them out because of their resources, right? I mean, they have just unbelievable resources, and when you talk about AI, it's whoever has the most resources to train models that'll end up kind of frothing themselves to the top of be the cream, if you will. And I think they've had some stumbles. Like Google's had some pretty big stumbles over the last year with you know, uh, trying to influence their image models and things like that, and in certain ways and certain ideologies. I think they're probably correcting for that to some degree, based on what I've seen. I haven't used VO, but just based on the sample, the curated sample, which is all kind of get when they make a press announcement like that. It's impressive. I mean, it's the clarity and the quality and the colors and you know the lack of some of those traditional AI artifacts and those sorts of things. Looks like they probably spent a significant amount of money training some really large data sets to come out with that, right? I mean, I think it was a wake up call back in, I think it was about when we did the podcast last time in February when OpenAI released their Sora, and I think that was a wake up call for a lot of folks, Google included, that hey, we need to invest in training, likely billions of dollars worth of training into these models to produce the best in class model, because that's kind of there's only a handful of folks that are doing this at that kind of level, and I think they're one of them at this point from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and for those who don't remember, the preview that Google gave us, I guess months ago now, was with Donald Glover, aka Childish Gambino, um, apparently working on some sort of film. I'm not sure if we're going to see that. How much generative AI video was involved, but apparently he's working on something with Google with VO. So next, let's talk about Meta and their new, or their not so new, I guess, product, Video Gen.
Yeah, that's another one that, to my knowledge, unless something was recent, isn't available to the public yet. It's mainly just, again, a curated, clips of videos, but they're another behemoth in the industry that has tons of resources. And the thing that's, that kind of excites me about Meta, I go back and forth on the company over the years, but one of the things I think Zuckerberg has done in the last year plus that's been a really good look, in my opinion, is the effort they've put into the open source community and training models that'll be open. I don't really know what the plan is. Maybe they've announced it for their video model, as far as if that'll be something that's open source. But as far as their language models, those sorts of things, and the Llama, they're continuing to train those, and they're purchasing as many H100 and every other GPU you can get, just like Elon is with X, so they can train more and more of these things. And it's a huge endeavor, a huge expense. But the flip side is they're making their models, for the most part, available in open source, which I think is pretty important, to keep that kind of community alive and to keep things as transparent as possible, and not, it it lessens the likelihood of just having a single player dominate and have a monopoly on a service that you have to pay for in order to do this one thing, right? And so, um, I'm not like a huge Meta fan in general, but I do like their stance on investing in that. And then from a video standpoint, it looks as good as any, right? I'm excited to jump in and use it.
So as you can probably see a theme. I'm starting out with all the big companies. I just went to, I guess it's been a couple of months now, to Adobe Max in Miami, and Adobe is. I think the reason Adobe is special is because they're one of the few players in the video generative AI video space that they have like an existing kind of installed user base of video editing professionals who will immediately benefit from anything they put into the space with regard to generative AI. So I'm curious, have you played with their Firefly tool? Do you know about it? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I've played with their Firefly image gen tool. I don't have access to their video gen.
At Adobe, we're building the future of video to help editors realize their creative vision faster and push it further. This past spring, we unveiled early explorations of generative AI in our video applications. And today, we're excited to share an update on progress and new capabilities that will help creatives overcome common editing challenges. Guided by our community's input, the Adobe Firefly video model is trained with creators' rights in mind and designed to be commercially safe. With Firefly text-to-video, you can use text prompts, a wide variety of camera controls, and reference images to generate B-roll that seamlessly fills gaps in your timeline. Quickly explore ideas for unique visual effects. Create elements for pre-visualization, like atmospheric overlays.
I think one thing that excites me about Adobe is because they are kind of an ecosystem of productivity and creativity tools. Um, the the demonstrations, at least they've done, of integrating some of that generative AI capability into things like Premiere and After Effects, and you know, doing things like outpainting, or being able to add detail, or change the aspect ratio of a video, or do in painting to realistic changes to a scene, using generative AI, is, I think, going to be a game changer for folks that would just need to modify or change or enhance an existing project or a future project that they're working on, without necessarily having to jump into a million other services and tools in order to do that. And again, they've got you know uh, quite a bit of resources to train as well, right? They're a big company, and they the other thing I like about them is they tend to focus on the ethical side of training, right? Like making sure that their data sets that they're training on are licensed, and whether that's video or imagery or stock imagery, those sorts of things, so that the creative professionals that are using their tools can kind of rest assured that they're not generating things in some gray area that maybe a law hasn't passed yet on, or something.
One thing I want to say. So actually, in the 100-year Lens newsletter, I wrote about my experience at Adobe Max, but I focused on they have a tool called Supersonic, and it's basically ambient AI audio to add to scenes to make them more realistic. And it's the tool is fascinating. I write about it. Check it out, 100year.substack.com. But one thing I didn't mention in the newsletter is, I mean, Adobe is throwing AI at everything. And at Adobe Max, they had this one suite where you could actually create your own brand. And so, I went up and I thought, this is whatever. I wasn't expecting much. And they walked me through it and they had me kind of create like a strange, uh, body lotion and fragrance line, right? Using AI. So it was generative AI images and the text and the marketing materials. I was like, okay, yeah, that was good. I wasn't impressed. It was like, oh, no, wait. Your products are waiting for you. I'm like, what are you talking about? They immediately printed out this completely original uh, body lotion line with my name, with my label on it, and it was on actual bottles of like hand sanitizer and body lotion. And so I have it here right now. Strange body.
Yeah.
I don't know. Might need to go into that. I don't know. But it was a fun example of how they can kind of harness AI in ways, particularly for marketing, that maybe a lot of people aren't expecting in terms of like streamlining a lot of processes.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that, it can't be underestimated how, folks like us that use tons of these tools, we don't mind jumping in and out of, these things, regardless of how complex or, however many tools they are. For at least for me, I'm a kind of a geek and I like doing that. But, when I also talk to like our marketing department pretty frequently at our company. We're a global technology integrator, and
name check. Wait. Name check your company.
Diversified. So it's
and
it's
say what you guys
onediversified.com.
do.
Yeah.
Say the Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so we do, and it's actually on my shirt here, if you can see that. We do technology integration services, right? So everything from production type studios to broadcast studios, like the big 3-letter studios, those sorts of things, as well as virtual production in the cloud technologies for live streaming and event production, and then also uh, we do all the kind of video collaboration technology and smart building technology, those sorts of things for kind of who's who of companies. I mean, if you name we're a global company and we work with, everybody from Amazon to Netflix to Apple to Meta to integrate technology for them. And I'm a vice president of innovation for our kind of intelligent workplace division.
And now, do you work with any? Do your solutions get applied to newsrooms, like TV newsrooms, at all?
Oh
D-
yeah. Yeah.
So along those lines, like AI has kind of, there are some companies that have been kind of making a play to deliver solutions. I think I heard Stephen King just shut down several of his radio stations. I think he didn't mention AI, but I know AI generated new music stations have kind of and hosts have kind of become an issue for some people. And now I'm seeing this kind of come to the newscasting world, like television news. Are you seeing any concerns or hearing any whispers of concerns from that space?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not just AI specific concerns, right? I mean, I think it's industry trend concerns, right? I mean, there's this trend away from needing a big studio to do anything, right? I mean, there's so much consumption that's shifting to social media and other platforms and other ways of distributing content and doing what you're doing, right? Like with podcasts, and that that there's still there's still live sports and there's still a need for some of that technology, but as the trends start that continue to move to more of like ad hoc, more almost at home independent folks that are producing some of this content, as well as leveraging AI tools to assist with some of the production elements of that, or the transcriptions or the translation features, or there's so many things that you can leverage AI for, visually, or with audio or whatever it might be, scripts, that there's kind of a pretty massive shift, I think, happening in that industry. There's some folks, some of our customers are aware, and they're looking to us to help lead them through that, and we do that. Others are kind of blind to it, to be honest, and they're just kind of like closing their eyes and ears and pretending like everything's going to stay the same.
Did you see that recent take from Ben Affleck on CNBC where he talked about the future of Hollywood? Did you agree, disagree? What'd you think of his take?
Yeah, I had mixed emotions on his take. I think that, it was interesting to hear someone passionately talk about a pretty complex topic like that that's actually a staple of Hollywood, like kind of he is. Um, so I thought that was kind of entertaining and interesting. I also felt like his take was kind of off. Like
Well,
he
well
was
let's recap. What was his take? If you can maybe recap what he said in brief.
well. So the parts that there was a couple parts to it, right? There was this idea that you know that there will be an impact, or there is an impact of AI on Hollywood, those sorts of things, and there's tools that are going to allow for more efficiency. I agree with that, right? Like there's going to be more tools integrated into how they produce things, and it's going to streamline things, and it's going to make everyone more efficient. It's going to enable folks that might only have a budget for a small independent film to be able to do more robust things. Totally agree with that. Where I disagreed with him was his take on that AI doesn't. I'm summarizing this. I don't remember the exact words, but he basically was saying AI can't help you with creativity. Like it's not creative. Like you still have to have the creativity in order to in order to get anything out of these tools. It can't create anything new, I think is what he said. I don't agree with that. Like I think that it's creating it's doing what we do, which is seeing the world as it is, and then coming up with something based on our past experiences or based on what it would have as training data, right? And that's creating something new in many cases. I mean, um, so I don't think that was an accurate assessment, and I think that the ability of AI to help humans be more creative and to help us ideate is like unparalleled. I do it all the time. Um, and but that's also it being creative in my mind. And so that was the part of the take I didn't agree with. But for the most part, I thought he was pretty accurate in his assessment and the other things he said. So
Yeah, I mean, at least he's thinking about it, which is, I guess, a start because you have a lot of, everything from directors to actors to production people, many people who simply refuse to even think about it. Like this is, I think eventually, everyone will come around and understand that this is a new tool and you will have to come to grips with it in some form or fashion. But he's finally I guess he made like a big play to kind of show he's on the edge of
mhm.
at least the Hollywood cohort.
Well, and
Um
it's one other thing I'll add is that it's interesting because it's not just him we're starting to hear about from Hollywood in regards to AI. It's also, James Cameron, for instance, just a few months ago joined Stability AI's board to kind of help, direct them and to get him more plugged into the AI scene with them. And then you have Lionsgate, John Wick, all those movies. Lionsgate has a partnership with Runway ML to train data and models on their movies and those sorts of things. And that's a pretty big studio, right? And so we're starting to see some of the integration happening finally with some of these bigger names.
I didn't mean to get this deep into this, but since we're here, let's go for it. What do you think, like when a Lionsgate does such a deal, which is probably just the first of many, what impacts do you think that has going forward? Like if I can then if I, we'll continue to talk about some other models, but if I have, let's say the top end, let's say we're 2 years out from now and I have the top end best model and it's all trained on my Lionsgate proprietary content I fully own, as a studio executive. And now I can generate, I don't even know, I can't think of whatever films Lionsgate has put out, but I'm pretty sure they're not behind the, you know, um, Mission Impossible franchise, but let's just pretend that's one of the because I think
Well,
Mission
John Wick,
Impossible.
that's all Lionsgate.
Okay, so
So.
John Wick. So I mean, are we okay with completely AI generated John Wick with no actual Keanu?
No, I'm not because I
Okay,
love
okay,
Keanu.
okay,
But
okay.
I think more than likely what it'll be is it'll be an additional tool in their tool set, right? I mean, they've got all these, VFX machines, right? And they've got just all these GPUs and these really powerful rendering farms, and they'll still have that. I mean, you're still going to need a certain level of CGI and special effects, but to be able to have, if you're coming out with John Wick 6 or whatever, and you're able to have maybe some of your cut scenes or add additional special effects to a scene that you might have shot based on prompting versus having a bunch of, a team of VFX artists try to create this explosion, right? And have it be lit right and all of the, and render it out. And it takes weeks and weeks, right? And now you might have some original footage that is for a future movie and you can literally just prompt it, and say an explosion here, right? Done, renders it out, right? I think that's going to be, kind of game changing. And then if it's trained on your specific assets and those sorts of things, now you could prompt it to put an actor in there, or if you missed a scene instead of going for a reshoot, maybe you could use
Okay,
that instead of
but speak to that though, because okay, so I want to my theory of what or addressing what Ben Affleck was saying and why I think he's wrong. He said a lot of what you just said, which is a lot of the AI will be used by studios to replace special effects, workers, lighting, all kinds of things, right? But I see three things happening. I think you will still always have real actors, but I think they may move to kind of this bespoke, artisanal, you know, indie film category where it's maybe more expensive to make, more expensive to see in terms of going to a theater. It will almost become like the theater in that it will be very rarefied and you will still have real actors acting traditionally. But I think in terms of Hollywood writ large, I think you'll have two kinds of actors. You'll have Andy Serkis type of people,
Mhm.
where basically you just have people who are really good with their bodies and expressions, and they know how to
Totally agree.
act like, expressively,
Mhm.
but they will be layered with an AI mask of some sort. That'll be one. And then the other kind of actor will be completely generative AI. So in that landscape, it seems like you kind of agree. Where does if I'm Lionsgate, if I'm the executive of Lionsgate 2 years on with a beautiful model and all my data trained on all the Lionsgate, John Wick films, do I need Keanu? Really?
I
I
mean,
mean, what
technically,
happens?
you probably don't. I mean, that's just the reality is that, you think about the acceleration curve of this technology and how far it's come in this short amount of time and how much better it's going to get. And even this scenario of 2 years, um, it's going to
So,
be incredible. Now, I don't know. I think there would be a ton of pushback, from fans and from everyone else. Like if they tried to make a John Wick movie without John Wick, but it had, or without Keanu Reeves, but it had John Wick in it, right? Like, I'm not sure how the public would take that because,
what if they can't tell?
yeah, well, I mean, is he still getting paid? There's questions like, are they just going to cut him out, save the cost, and then,
So
you
I
know,
guess so let me put this to you. So I guess the question is, I don't know that I would frame it as an ethical question. I guess some would see it as an ethical question. I'm framing it more as just, what do we want as humans? Do you think as humans, do you think we will be okay with let me just kind of frame it in a different way. Let's say John Wick didn't exist, and let's just say they decided to create a new character that was an amalgam of all these
mhm,
other characters from old Lionsgate films, and it was completely AI generated. So no existing actor, but they put it together and it's popular and it does well. I can see in that case there being an argument for, okay, well, this is whole cloth AI, let it do its thing, it has its fans, so on and so forth. Okay, I get that part. But replacing, like, I mean, let's just take the classics, Bing Crosby, Fred Astaire, Elvis, Marilyn Monroe, I mean, we will soon, I mean, probably can now, but I mean, indistinguishable from reality,
mhm.
have the ability to create brand new, engaging, really cool films with these people.
Yeah. I think there's going to be kind of a crossroads, if you will. I think that'll happen where we'll have, studios as well as the audience is going to have to decide if they like that or not. I think we've, even when you look out 2 years, I mean, 2 years is obviously a lot can happen, but I mean, at a minimum, I think you're still going to need the Andy Circus, right? Like there's no real great way to control and prompt, even the best models today to have the nuance of a true, you know, uh, person, acting with facial expressions and, the little intricate details that you get from doing that. I mean, you can kind of like have AI, cry, like, do some emotional things, but um, if you're able to drive that AI character with a person, it's so much better, right? Now the difference is you don't need the full motion capture suit and all the dots on the fit, like all the technology they've used for a decade plus. You don't need any of that anymore with some of these tools, which is cool. You can do it in your home, but you still need a person with good ability to express themselves in order to make it realistic and captivating in my mind.
Yeah, and along those lines, I have a prediction to make. I think in terms of influencers, influencers and AI actors, you will see a crop of these new actors rise, and they'll almost always be masked, but they will become famous for their distinctive movements and
Mhm.
quirks. And one
Yep.
example I would give is I think I'm saying the name right, Bella Porch, who became famous on TikTok. She has a very specific kind of set of facial movements and kind of cutesy little things that she does. And I can see and some I've seen people play with her very famous videos now layered with AI. And I can see that kind of, becoming a thing where is that Bella? Is that one of Bella's
Mhm.
videos? Even though it's masked, you can kind of tell from the
Yeah.
mannerisms. We stayed on this topic far too long. Now we have to blow past these other models. There's another one that just came out. Back to the new AI video models. Amazon just came out with Nova Real. Now I believe they just showed a preview. I don't believe it's available as far as I know. Did you get a look at this? Is this completely new to you? Did I throw a curveball or?
No, I've seen just the little release that they did, but yeah, it's Amazon getting into the game, right? I mean, another one of these big guys with deep pockets and lots of server infrastructure.
So, okay, so the next category I want to go through fairly quickly is I will call these startups, AI video startups. I'm sure you heard about the leak that happened for OpenAI Sora.
Mhm.
Apparently, there were artists who I guess got access to it and wanted to protest. I mean, I know it's been a while since it initially came out. A lot has happened. Are you still optimistic about Sora? Are you
Yeah, I
excited?
mean, they were the ones that when they dropped, it was such a revolutionary improvement over the existing what was available, right? Like from a video gen. I mean, there was some really cool technology back in January, February, even last year, but when Sora dropped, it was like, oh my goodness, this is next level consistency, quality, length of video. I mean, it was really great. And then it wasn't long after that some competitors came along with their either new companies dropped some technology that was similar, or the existing companies released their new models that was similar. But the interesting thing about the leak with Sora just last week or whenever it was some folks they it leaked by them putting the API on Hugging Face, and so it was made available to people for a very short amount of time where they could generate some videos with it for free essentially. I got in there, I think 2 hours after it was available, and it was still up, but the generation queue was crazy long, and I tried generating something and I couldn't get it through, and then they shut it down. But there were a decent amount of videos that were posted, online from their model. It looks like it improved even since then, based on those updated generations that people were able to run. So I'm still very optimistic about it. I think that it's there's some competitors out there now that are as good, from what I can tell, and a lot of it depends on your use case too, because what a lot of these companies are doing is they're adding features that are fairly unique. Like it's one thing to have a state of the art text to video image, which is really all we've seen from Sora at this point, where it's like a prompt and then it gives you a video and it looks great. Well, there's a lot of folks doing that look great, but then a lot of them have, most of them have added the ability to take an image, which kind of changes the game if you prompt it with an image, because now you can use things like Flux or something else and create, I did this with myself, create yourself as a superhero, make yourself look like Thor or Spider-Man or the Hulk or something, and then animate that. Right. And so that gives you some more freedom. And now there's other tools like frame to frame, right? Like being able to take two different frames and then have, prompt the AI to figure out how to get from point A to point B realistically. Right. Which is really powerful. Or outpainting, right, where you can turn a portrait type video of on your cell phone, even it doesn't have to be an AI video, that you took into landscape by having it fill in the details on the right and left to make it, from 9:16 to 16:9, filling in all the details, or vice versa, almost like a zoom out, which we
Well,
saw done
well,
in
well, I wanted to talk about that.
yeah,
Let's go to the next one, which the next product, which is, I would say, the elephant in the room, Runway.
yeah.
Runway just released Gen 3 Expand, which allows you to take video from whatever aspect ratio and just expand it. And it pretty, I would, I hate the word magic in when I talk about tech, but it almost seems like magic the way it gets it right, filling in details that were never apparent in the original video. Have you used Expand for Runway yet? What'd you think?
Yeah, I've used it quite a bit, and I've posted online quite a bit, and got a couple really viral, several million view posts on there, and it's super cool. I mean, it's not perfect, right? But for what it's able to do, and I love taking. I was taking some examples. I was taking like just some movie clips that were 16:9 and converting them to 9:16, which makes it ideal to post on like Instagram Reels or TikTok or something like that. And it fills in the detail really eloquently. And sometimes it gets it way off, and you have to modify your prompt and try to get it right, But it's from a capability perspective, it is super interesting. And I think Pika was the first one. Pika Labs was the first one to do that, but they were limited, I think, 4 seconds, might have been 5 seconds. It was like 3 to 5 seconds or something, which is pretty short at that amount of time. And the quality was at that when they released it, it was like, wow, this is super cool, because it's not just outpainting a picture like we were used to with Photoshop or something like that, where we were increasing the canvas size or something, but it was outpainting video. And I think that what Runway dropped with their Gen 3 was really impressive. I mean,
Yeah, I think the thing that's game change that's a big game changer. But the thing that's game changing for me with Runway is the increase in time for video to video. For me, from my vantage point, I've done a few indie films, and I am wildly excited by the prospect of taking real filmed video and then just moving it into AI and playing with it and creating all kinds of new works. And I think they just moved it from 10 seconds to 20 seconds. Do I have that right?
yep,
And,
yeah, it's and it's really fun, man. It's really cool what you can do with if you're creative, right? I mean, feeding some good source material in there, anything you've shot yourself, and then prompting it. I've got one where I took I think it's a couple jogging on a trail, and I turned them into pasta noodles jogging on a countertop in a kitchen, right? And it's just you wouldn't be able to even fathom trying to do something like that prior. I mean,
yeah,
it's incredible.
I'm curious. You do a lot of superhero experiments with AI, and one of my favorites is a thing you did with the Fantastic Four, because you didn't just do the Fantastic Four, but you used the cast from the upcoming 2025 movie. So you actually mapped their faces onto the characters, Mr. Fantastic, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, Human Torch, and the Thing. What did you use for that?
Yeah, so that was kind of a lot of times I'm using multiple tools. So that was for the cast themselves. I think I used Midjourney to create, a still image of, Pedro Pascal as Mr. Fantastic, for instance, or whatever. And I did that for each of the characters, and with them being in a similar environment. It was like this destruction type environment. Like there was kind of fire and buildings destroyed around them. And then I took those stills and brought them into Luma Labs for that particular, because they were the only ones at that point in time that did kind of a start and end frame capability. Now you've got Kling, you've got Runway, and some others that do start and end, but Luma was kind of the first to ship that. And so I was able to kind of do this continual movement from character to character to character, to the entire cast of the upcoming Fantastic Forecast, and have it transition almost like a camera was panning or something, or moving around to each of them. And then I did an animation, I think, with the Thing, Ben Grimm or whatever, changing into the Thing, which isn't even accurate to the comics. It's not like he's the Hulk. He doesn't just
Right.
turn from a human into
Right.
the Thing. But, I just wanted to show the tool off. So I had it, I had those be two different keyframes where it was like the actor and then the Thing. And it, it figured out the keyframes in between, and you just put them in an editor. And so that was a pretty fun one. It went pretty viral. I got a lot of positive and negative feedback. You reach this certain threshold. It's kind of funny. You reach a certain threshold on these platforms. I think you get over, I don't know, sometimes it's over 1 million views, but it's even over 100,000 views. You kind of bleed into the AI haters territory, I think, or something. And it's just, and little do they know, they're actually amplifying your reach, right? Because they're reposting you with some derogatory comment and giving you more views. But so that happened on that one quite a bit. There were people for some reason very upset that I made a Fantastic Four video with the future actors on it. But
yeah, and there's always going to be like haters, particularly when you go viral. Have you had a chance to use Haiper and LTX video?
I've used LTX locally within Comfy UI for kind of that open source, model. It's pretty decent, but if you would have asked me yesterday, 2 days ago, I would have probably said it's the best open source, but it's not anymore. Because as of,
We're coming to that. Yeah, I know
okay.
I think I know what you're about to say. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, there's another one.
So,
Yeah.
all right. So those are kind of, so we talked about the big existing old tech players. We talked about some of the more, I guess, well-known, US/Europe based players. Now I want to talk about the Chinese players. They have taken this space by storm. And I want to mention one that just came out. Couldn't have been more than a few weeks ago. I think it's Bytedance, and they came out with Seaweed and Pixeldance. Pixeldance and Seaweed from Bytedance. Have you had a chance to see this? I think it was just a preview. I don't think you can actually access it yet.
No, yeah, I think I saw just the preview. Usually if there's a tool like associated with it, it goes crazy viral, and we end up, our whole AI community ends up signing up and testing it out. And that's not one I've tested. I've only kind of seen the papers and some of the samples on, but yeah, there's some really interesting things happening with some of these models from China, and I think,
so no, I'm gonna mention them. So I want to go step by step. Yeah. Okay, so Bytedance, just for those who don't know the name, they are the parent company of TikTok. They are also the parent company of CapCut, which is becoming one of the most popular video editing tools on social media and just in general, particularly because there are a lot of AI tools built into CapCut as a video editor. So I would actually say Bytedance is probably the only company I would compare right now to Adobe in terms of having a very robust video editor along with advanced AI tools. let's see, Hailuo, if I'm saying it
Mhm.
right, from Minimax, which
Yep.
had an investment of 600 million from Alibaba. For those who don't know, Alibaba in China is basically gigantic. It's like, I guess, the Amazon of China.
Mhm.
So when they invest in something, that's a very big deal. Um, Hailu, have you checked that? If I'm saying it
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's their. I think it's the Hailuo AI is the company, and then in their Minimax, I think is maybe the platform or something, the video platform. But
I think
it's
it's the reverse. I think Minimax
or
might be the
you're
company
right.
and Hailu is the product. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're 100% right. It's really impressive. I mean, they they initially launched with limited access and you just text to video only. They've added image to video now and some other um some other capabilities in there, but it's really good. I mean, they're definitely a contender. Is right up there with providing some really quality models to use.
All right. So there's only two left that I have to mention. And if you have others, please mention them. But I'm going to save the best for last. So, second to best from last is Kling. I remember when Kling came out, the big hurdle for a lot of people was that I think you needed like a Chinese phone number or you had to use some sort of, you can tell me about this after I'm done getting it wrong, like a Chinese VPN, you had to do some translation to even like use the tool. But the reason it excited people, at least a couple of months ago, is that it seemed to be the closest thing to Sora, which wasn't widely available at the time. Kling, I did see your experiments with that. What did you think about it when it came out? Do you think it's still up to snuff?
Yeah, it's still honestly one of my favorites. I mean, I it's kind of my go-to for a lot of things. I mean, it's one of kind of two go-tos, but um and when it first came out, I got so lucky because it was in June, early June. They opened it up, and you did need, there was all these people trying to get Chinese phone numbers and stuff, and I tried doing that, but then ended up finding a workaround and got early access by basically signing up to this other Chinese app that would allow you to authenticate, to use an authentication mechanism like a QR code from that app to authenticate into the Chinese version of Kling before it was available in the U.S. And so I was able, I was one of like very few people I think posting Kling, you know, renders, on X at least, and so that was kind of exciting for me at least, and I was able to kind of put it through its paces. And they've updated their model, a few times in their feature sets, and adding first and last frame, and similar to Luma, and their models improving, the length of time, the duration, I guess, is improving, um, and it's just really solid. It's the I think it where it really nails it is if you want that realistic handheld camera effect, like if you were holding your iPhone or something and filming somebody walking down the street. It's not just this perfectly still image, that's zooming out of them walking. It's almost like somebody's holding it, right? And that little bit of motion, natural motion that you can show their data sets are trained on that. And so um and the fact that you can upload any really image to it and animate that is, it's a powerful platform, and one of my favorites.
Okay, last but not least, and this is one I'm not that familiar with, but I've seen you experiment with it in recent days. Hun Yuan from Tencent, which for those who don't know, Tencent in China is another big. It's one of China's tech giants. They dominate social media and I guess to some degree e-commerce. Tencent is it's like I'm trying to think of like what's the they're basically think Apple, Google, Amazon, Facebook, or rather Meta. Tencent is on that tier in China. If you don't know who they are, so what do you think about Hun Yuan, if I'm saying it
Yeah,
correctly?
I don't know how you say it, to be honest. I think it's as close as we're gonna get. Pretty impressed. So the one unique thing, that's exciting about them is they've open sourced their model, right? And so these others that we've been talking about, whether it's Kling or Runway or Luma or Pika, any of them, those are all models that they've trained in house, and they charge a service fee for you to access them, and you use tokens or whatever the pricing model is. Um, whereas this one, they've trained a very robust model, I think it's 13 billion parameters or something like that. And they've released the weights and the actual model files so that you can, if you have hardware that's capable, you can run this yourself, right? And so that's the exciting thing. Now, the drawback, which isn't their fault by any means, is that the hardware requirements to run it are very high. So there's, I've actually got it running. The open source community is amazing. So there's some comfy UI nodes that have been published just as of yesterday, I think, maybe, that allow you to run it. I can run it on my RTX 4090, but I have to really scale down like the resolution to like 360p kind of, and put it to like I don't know, 60 frame, maybe 2 seconds of video. And it turns out okay. But then you can also run it on Replicate, or I'm guessing there'll be a Hugging Face, interface for it here before long, if there's not already. And you can do like 720p, 1280 by 720 at 5 to, actually, my most recent test I posted just before this podcast, I had it going up to 10 seconds. And it was really great. I mean, I was trying to replicate the Sora video of the blue alien. I don't know if you remember that, but he was walking through New York City. I did a similar one, pretty simple prompt, and its prompt adherence is fantastic. On a lot of benchmarking tools, there's not a ton of benchmarking tools that exist, but on ones that, where users rate, prompt adherence and quality, it actually beats out a lot of the bigger names. I think it'll be yet determined if it really, really beats those out, or if that's just, marketing or something. But it's the fact that you can kind of run this either on your own hardware if you have it, or on, a service like Replicate, just for comparison, you still have to pay for the GPU cycles, on something like Replicate, and it's using an H100. So, a 5-second video using that platform, using that model, it takes about 5-6 minutes to render, and it'll cost you about 70 cents. So, for testing and that sort of thing, it's reasonable. I feel like, just, using that, because that's an H100, I think it's like a $30,000 GPU. I'm not going to buy that for my house. Right.
Right. I'm
But,
curious about cost. So let's take something like what you just mentioned versus a Runway, which is, I believe they have a package that's like $100 a month, $100 a month.
mhm.
Like, what, I mean, do you feel that the costs associated with a Runway are worth it versus like an open source solution where you, I guess, get more freedom, you have more control, you don't have any kind of censorship, no one's watching what you're generating, really?
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely positives and negatives to both. I can't imagine myself giving up things like Runway or Kling anytime soon for one of the open source ones. I think the open source options are nice as an additional kind of tool in the tool bag, but they require processing, significant processing, just like the big guys do, and so you're going to be paying somebody somewhere for something, and the tool sets are so much further along in these dedicated platforms right now. Like don't get me wrong, I love the open source community, and there's so much coming out of that, and there's so much you can do with things like Comfy. But for simplicity and being able to just generate something easily and have access to a whole suite of tools, something like Runway or Kling or Luma, like it's for the more normal, average user, that's definitely the way to go. And I don't think they're priced exorbitantly. Um, I think even Kling, you can get for $50 a month, you get like 8,000 credits, and depending on the model that you're using, it's anywhere from, I think, 10 credits for a 5-second base, 1.0 model render, to 35, I think, credits for, maybe 70 credits for a 10-second, their new model 1.5. So you can do quite a bit with 8,000 credits a month,
Oh,
which is what I
oh,
have.
I want to go back to Luma Labs, Dream Machine, and Pika Labs, because you never actually, I think, gave like a full opinion on Dream Machine. And you mentioned Pika Labs. That was actually one that I failed to mention. So can you give me, what are your takes on both? Like, maybe contrast them.
Yeah, so I think they're both fun. Like in my mind, they're I don't know if it's the right way to describe them. They're kind of the fun models, right? Like they like Luma, like let me focus on them for a second. Like they're um if you want to like do really wacky stuff, like they're image to image, they're frame to start frame to end frame, like the way it interpolates to make that animation to me is just more fun than the other platforms, and it's hard to describe, but it's like a lot of times on Runway or even Kling, I'll say, I want to go from this image to this image, and it'll really struggle to make that gap, and sometimes it'll just do a dissolve, like you would do, like it would take the first few seconds, and then it would like do a cut or a dissolve like you would in an editor to the other image. Luma almost never does that. It just figures a way to get there, but it also it's almost like it doesn't have as tight adherence to trying to keep it as realistic as possible, and so you get
Thus
some
Dream
weird,
Machine.
right. It's more like a
Yeah.
dream, right? And
Yeah.
and so that can be kind of fun. And I think some of the viral videos you've seen online of just wacky things where like a turtle turns into a thing and then it turns into a jet ski and then like just weird stuff, that's probably Luma, because it allows for that very creative interpretation of frame to frame, which is kind of fun.
Oh, and Pika briefly.
And then Pika, they're constantly improving their models as well. They made a big splash, and then they kind of got overshadowed by some of the bigger companies that then made their big splash, and then then they came back with an updated model a couple months ago with Peak Effect, I think is what they call it, where you can have like you can squish or poke or have a press come down and squish something or turn anything into
Oh
cake.
yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So they've got these pre-built things that they've trained their model on, so you can say, hey, whatever this image is or this picture I have, I want this to be cake, right? And it'll be, if it's a picture of me, it'll like cut me, and then there's cake inside of me, right? Like it makes me
Right. I remember that. Yeah, that was
so
great.
those things are kind of fun, and I think both Luma and Pika are very good if you're wanting to make like kind of viral videos that are just wacky and fun and weird. And
Okay, so that's all of them. We're at the end of 2024. You're on a desert island. You have electricity somehow, and you have a very robust computer somehow. But you can only use one of the tools we've mentioned to create. You must create a short film of 10 minutes as a thesis project to get you off the island. The arbiters of your freedom must be convinced that you are sufficiently talented to get off of this island. Which of all the tools we mentioned do you use? You only get one. You can't pair them up or anything.
It's Runway.
Okay.
Yeah. Mainly because Act One, which we didn't really talk about, their feature called Act One, and that's their kind of expression face driving, where you can record yourself or take anyone else. It's the one I use for the Thanos, Joe Rogan. It's the amount of control you have and the quality of that output. If I was wanting to really tell a story but have like an AI, fictional characters that either maybe don't even look real or human, but I want to drive true emotion and facial expression and dialogue, there's nobody else that can touch that right now. And then on top of the fact that, the other tools, just their ability to do like you mentioned, you love the video to video capabilities, being able to change any sort of video. And I think what it comes down to is it's, the ability to use my own camera or my own, iPhone or whatever, I have as the basis for the production, and almost treat it like a true production, whether it's just me or with actors, and then being able to add the special effects or the AI overlay, the layer, or the facial expressions through Act One. That would be the one tool if I had to pick right now. That's where I'd
Good
be.
answer. I think, I think that's probably the best answer. I just want to key in on what you just said about video to video and my excitement about it. The reason I'm excited about it is because I'm seeing a lot of people in the space generate videos, whether it's kind of mimicking a franchise or just doing some sort of dreamscape or whatever. And that's great. But my prediction, my belief from what I've seen over and over again in technology innovation is that filmmakers will be the true beneficiaries and true pioneers of this art form. And there are things filmmakers can do that, someone sitting at home, who can make cool videos, maybe they'll reach a certain point, maybe you'll have a few outliers, but in the main, I think if you are a filmmaker, if you like to shoot video, if you like to build stories, if you like to write scripts and create narratives, this is where you will shine if you embrace AI and video to video. I don't know, from my vantage point, that's the most powerful in terms of like getting accuracy of movement, controlling settings, all of that. It seems to be the most powerful, at least near term, dynamic. So that's why I'm excited about it. I'm curious, like, what do you see for 2025? Give me a prediction as we wrap up.
Well, I think that the models themselves are just, I mean, all these companies that we mentioned during this podcast, they all have a lot of funding. A lot of them are actually charging for services, which increases their ability to have funding. And so they're just going to keep training models, right? And on more powerful machines to improve the quality and improve things like the resolution, the duration, the control, you know, and so I think that we're the tool sets that we're going to have in 25. I mean, I think that really 24 was kind of the year of video, but I think it's really 25 is going to be the year of AI video, and that's just the quality of the output and how these tools are going to be able to be used to make, to empower creators, is going to be unparalleled. I mean, you have to kind of remind yourself that this, right now is as worse as it's ever going to be. Right. And it's just going to keep getting better. And, there's, I think, competition's a good thing. And there's a lot of competitors, big and small, that are competing for, to be the platform that people use. And, I wouldn't be able to predict a winner. I don't know if there'll be, a single winner, but, I think the tools are just going to keep evolving, keep improving, and keep, being something that creative people can put into their tool chest and leverage to be more efficient and be more creative and, tell more compelling stories or get a good laugh, whatever your goal is.
Do you think 2025 is when we will see our first full length AI film, whether it's video to video or completely generative?
I don't know. I mean, I think, like, I don't,
Feature length is what I'm saying, not short film,
yeah,
like a full
no, I
feature
know what
length.
you're saying. I think I think it depends on what you define as that, because I mean, even, technically there's already been a couple feature length films that were AI. They just weren't, mainstreamed everywhere. In fact, I was part of the production of the T2 remake film. I don't know if we talked about
Oh
that
yeah, we
already.
had those guys on. Yeah.
Yeah. So, there was like 50 of us that each did a scene, right, from the Terminator 2
But that was
movie. And
wasn't that more like an anthology in a way, or kind of almost like Love, Death, and Robots kind of project?
yeah, it was
Yeah.
similar, right? But it was AI. It was AI through and through. And, we couldn't use any like real source material. We had to generate everything. Um, and it was, debuted at a theater in Hollywood, right? So, and that wasn't even the first one. I thought it was the first one, but there was somebody else that did something before that. But I think, as far as like a mainstream, production, I'd be surprised if that happens in 2025 to where it would be in the movie theater. I think one of the areas that will need some drastic improvement, and maybe we'll get some improvement over this next year, is in the resolution of some of this stuff. I mean, it's so processor intensive to generate any of this that, like, I think Kling is probably the king right now as far as their 1.5 model will do full 1080p. But even that, I mean, you're not going to want to go put that on a 100-foot, screen, right? I mean, we need to be like doing 4K, and there's AI upscalers that can kind of bridge that gap in the short term, I think. But that's going to be one thing that's going to need to improve before we start going on the silver screen regularly, I think.
But I think that's why some people, myself included, predict that horror will be maybe the first full length AI feature, because if you look at something like Skinamarink, that became like a cult hit. It was feature length. It wasn't AI generated, but the quality of the actual visuals, it was like, the aesthetics were designed to be deliberately kind of degraded. And
Mm-hmm.
so I could see, if we take a horror aesthetic, and use AI, whether it's video to video or completely generative, that's where I could see maybe you get your first full length where the aesthetic is deliberately degraded imagery.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily, the visuals don't have to be sweetened necessarily like you might with a, crispy Transformers film or
Right.
something like that.
Yeah. And
Um,
well, it's exciting that we're even able to talk about this being a possibility. I mean, allowing somebody that has like a vision to, that might not have the funding to make a full featured length film, a traditional full length feature film, to be able to use some of these tools to get that vision and to get that script and get the shots and the storyboards and put the whole thing together and actually tell a compelling story, because that's really what matters more than even the visuals do. I mean, you could tell a compelling story with animation and illustrative animation or abstract animation, right? And these tools will allow folks to do that, and I think it's just inevitable. Whether it's 2025 or not, it's hard to say. It could be, but it's definitely exciting.
Actually, yes, let me amend my prediction, because this is what I've been thinking about a lot as well. I think the first full length will be horror or animation, because I think animation is much easier as well. Blaine Brown, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. Tell us again where people can find you and your work, not just your AI work, but maybe also your production work as well.
Yeah. So, the company I'm with is Diversified. We're at onediversified.com, but all of my social media, I'm on Instagram and I'm on X and do a little bit of TikTok. I haven't really gained footing over there yet, but it's all at Blizaine. It's Blizaine, as well as blizaine.com. But most of my stuff's on social media. And I post creative tutorials, as well as just experimentation, right, with the latest imagery and video AI generation tools.
I said that was the last question, and I know we're running long. I know your time is short,
Oh,
but
you're
please
good.
indulge me. I got two very short, quick questions. One, of if someone's unfamiliar with your work, and let's say they go to Instagram, what's the one video you would tell them to watch first? The best example of your skills, your sorcery.
Yeah, well, probably a fun one, I would say, if they went on Instagram. It's actually pinned. It's one of the three that are pinned on there, and it's an Avengers dance party. They might have seen it already because it's got 2.5 million views or something like that on there.
Nice,
But
nice.
it was Luma Labs. If people are curious of the tools, and I created the song as well. I used, obviously we didn't even touch on generative music here. That's a whole another podcast.
Suno. I know
Yeah,
you're a fan of Suno.
yeah, I love Suno, and so the track I made is actually named it Avenger Palooza, and it's actually on Spotify. I got a whole album. I've got two albums on Apple Music and Spotify and all the things, and that's one of them. And and so that's kind of a fun one that got a lot of positive. It's one of the few that went really super viral, and I didn't get a lot of hate from it.
It's
So
interesting that you say you did your songs referencing, I guess, Avengers, using Suno, and they're on Spotify, and they're still up. We had the guy, Willonius Hatcher, who did the BBL Drizzy viral song about Drake. We had him on the podcast months ago. Uh, and somehow, magically, somehow, mysteriously, his song was removed from Spotify. And if you look at the recent, this is now I'm getting into music gossip territory. If you look at
mhm.
the recent lawsuit filed by Drake against his label and Kendrick, you have to wonder: did Drake have a hand in getting that viral BBL Drizzy song removed when your songs are just up there, doing just fine, referencing popular characters. No one's touching them.
Yeah.
AI songs, but somehow the BBL Drizzy song got removed. One
I
of the
don't
many
know.
mysteries.
Yeah.
One last thing I want to ask you about, though, and this is kind of, I guess, like kind of rewinding just a bit back to the Chinese AI video startups question, or tools, because they're not all startups. In the same vein that some people have concerns about TikTok and security, and is this, some sort of back end tool by the Chinese government, and Cold War concerns and that kind of thing. Do you have any concern about using these tools, these AI video tools from China, with regard to your own personal security, data leakage, exposure to, who knows what?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always need to have some level of, have your guard up, and sort of like the information that you provide. I mean, I'd be kind of hesitant to like post, to upload pictures of my kids, for instance, into one of those tools and like animate them. I know that that could maybe be tempting for people, and I don't know what they would do with that, but things like that I wouldn't do. Most of what as far as most of these tools aren't things that are physically installed on your computer, right? So there's a little less risk because they're just web accessible, browser kind of based tools. But I think there is a legitimate concern there. I think the bigger concern likely is the maybe the ethical side of the fact that it seems like there's a different standard in China as far as what they're willing to train on. And I think that our our legal system is going to need some updating, because it's we can either hamstring our own US companies and their ability to train on things, while other folks in the rest of the world don't have those limitations, or we can figure out a way that is equitable for everybody. And I don't think we've crossed that bridge yet, and I think we need to figure out a solution, or we're going to fall behind, because we're already kind of at an energy disadvantage with China, right? They um, you know, whichever side of the political spectrum you're on, there's there's less, we're less energy dependent. Here, we're we're more dependent on others' energy in the U.S. than say like China is, that's still using coal. The whole environmental side aside, just looking at the raw energy that these GPU farms and facilities require, they have an advantage, right? They have two major advantages in China, over us, and one is their I guess ability to, or their lack of concern for copyrighted material and training on it, and two is the ability to use as much energy and create as much energy and put in nuclear and coal and every other form of energy you could possibly want with little regulation. Those are disadvantages for us in the AI race, and not just for video, but for for AGI and everything else that are very real concerns. And I think that's somewhere that we need, some of our representation here in the U.S. to address what the right path forward is there. Not that we
Well
should,
said.
try to destroy the planet or anything, but we just, there just needs to be some more time spent on that.
Well said. Well said. You guys can check out previous episodes of the 100-Year Podcast at hundredyear.com. And as I mentioned earlier, you can check out the newsletter at hundredyear.substack.com. Latest issue touches upon AI sound, ambient sound, specifically from Adobe. Again, Blaine, Blizane, as you're known on social media. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. This has been great. I hope you have a great 2025. And we'll probably try to get you back again, man, because I know you're going
Yeah.
to keep going viral.
Yeah. Love it, man. Anytime. You just let me know.
Thanks, man. And we will see you next time.